Hi, hello, and welcome to LearnStroke IAS classes by Arjun. And you're listening to the new current affairs series for 2024 examination, and that is the editorial analysis for 2024 examination. And this is the class 3 that we are discussing. So let's quickly, and for all the people who have not downloaded the LearnStroke IAS app, please do download the app and watch the free classes. And reminding you about the online 2024 UPSC batch called the Cloud9 Batch. And why UPSC editorials are very important, because you can just check and read it. Do not ignore it, because we are going to find it out, the most important points. And let's check the first editorial here. The first editorial that we are discussing here is the linear regression. So what does it actually talk about? So recently, these days, this is a very good example of GS paper 3. You can mark it as the GS paper 3 economy. It's very important from that perspective. So one thing that you will note is that these days a lot of articles regarding statistics is actually coming in. So the questions also come in whether a good statistics and a credible statistics is important for the economy. How is it important for the economy? This is actually something that is actually being coming in the news. And in this context, let's find out the important points regarding this, and let's apply the IAS filter, and let's get the important points here. So, according to it, says statistics are very, very vital for an economy. Why? So, recently, you should know that the government versus many statistical agencies that brings out a lot of statistics are actually having a big time issue. So, at one side, you have the government, and the other side, you have the statistics departments or various departments that brings out surveys, because these surveys are very, very important, because only with the surveys you are able to formulate a lot of policies. When you get surveys like poverty, unemployment, you get a lot of surveys, and you take that surveys and you create policies. So recently, the government versus a lot of statistical agencies, because the data published by one is totally different from the data published by the other. So there is a contradiction actually coming into place. So you can know that the fight with the government agencies and statistical agencies is one important point. And the over influence of Niti Ayog. So in this context, you see that the Niti Ayog has actually exerting a larger over influence in many of the areas. So one thing you have to remember, what is IIPS? You can take a look, International Institute for Population Sciences, IIPS. And in this context, very, very important, it comes in the news. What is NFHS, or National Family Health Service, which reports directly to the Health Ministry? And there is another important survey called the Periodic Labor Force Survey by the NSSO. So these questions are also very, very important for the prelims examination. You should know IIPS, remember IIPS and NFHS, and also Periodic Labor Force Survey. So this is something that the editorial is discussing, and it talks about difference of opinions. So why there is a difference of opinion is also another important area that we have to be understanding here. So recently understand that the NFHS 2019-21, the survey actually debunked the government claim in 2019 that all the villages were open defecation free, or ODF. So this concept of ODF is actually very, very, everybody is talking about having clean toilets, having a Swachh mission, and having cleanliness. So this concept of ODF, that is open defecation free, the government said that all the villages are actually open defecation free. But on the other side, the NFHS actually said that uh, it is not so. It showed that 19% of surveyed households did not use any toilet facility at all. So that means this is a point when government actually does one thing, and on the other side, a statistical agency is actually trying to do another thing. So what happens is the data actually given by both the agencies is totally different. So don't you think it's a big time problem, where one time we claim a lot of things, and on the other side there is a big time issue on that? And it also showed that there is a high rise in anemia, and 57% of the surveyed rural households lacked access to LPG or even natural gas. Just imagine, more than 57%. So that, don't you think it's a big 57% of the people actually who do not even have access to LPG or natural gas, and This is the time when government was actually trying to popularize the Ujjwal Yojana. So at one time you say that everybody is getting benefited by the LPG, and on the other side we get reports like this, that the anemia and the LPG natural gas, everything is not at par. So this is actually a contradiction. So simply you can understand that this is nothing but a big contradiction that has happened. So this is actually important areas that the editorial discusses about. And also, what are some of the government interferences? I've actually marked some of the government interferences. One is Niti Aayog's involvement in releasing the back series on GDP growth. So the GDP growth was actually contradicted because the NSE report in 2019 was another indication of the government's effort to undermine the traditional statistical institution. So the Niti Aayog's influence is also one important thing, and it contradicted the NSE report in 2018. So again, one one area, one area, two set of datas, two set of data. That is something that has been discussed here. And even the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister sought to discredit the methodology used by NFHS. So other side, the government is discrediting NFHS, and on the other side, NFHS is saying that the government data is not correct. So the basic difference is the debate between these organizations. So have an idea strong regarding. So with this, I'm giving you important questions also. A robust independent statistical system is necessary for any development to happen. Analyze and give examples. So this is a good question where you need to understand a robust independent statistical system is very, very important and necessary. So we have to prove this also. And explosion of public data in a growing digital world of commerce and governance. So this is an essay question. The explosion of public data in a growing digital world of commerce and governance is also an important area that we have to understand. And find out the master checklist for 2024 examination. Find out the answers. Know what is NFHS. Find out, read more about open defecation free, National Statistical Office survey, National Annual Rural Sanitation Survey, Ujjwal Yojana, and what is NSC, National Statistical Commission, because this was actually discredited. Niti Aayog had a problem with this. And what is MOSPI, or the Ministry of Statistic and Program Implementation? So you call it as MOSPI. So which, this is very important. You can get many of the questions for the prelims. Expect questions from these areas for the next year. So that is something very important from these areas. And having a robust statistical system is important. So please do check it out. And moving on to the next important editorial is the trajectory of progress must change. So it is a very good article. It talks about G20 and the role of India. Very good. It talks about G20 and the role of India and how India should actually evolve and what are some of the challenges. So very, very important from the perspective of GS paper 2, international relations. So you can read this article from GS paper 2, international relations perspective. So let's check out what is the important articles and the points that are coming inside this. So let's apply the IAS filter and take the important points. Here we go. And India and the global governance. That is the most important thing. This can also be a good question. India and the global governance. What are the challenges? So you should know that of a greater significance to the world, the most happier thing is that G20 is actually led by India. This is something very proud. And the world's most populous country, as India has overtaken China, and the most India is actually leading the G20. This is something to be very proud. You can be very proud on that. And the article also talks about the transition from G7, the transition from G7 to G20. So, how a G7 grouping of famous countries got transitioned into G20s? So, the last, what was the reason? In the last 30 years, what the many of the global financial crisis compelled it, because the world in the last 30 years, it is very important. In the last 30 years, the world changed. The world changed to such an extent that slowly the purpose of G7 wanted to include more and more countries. So that is why G7 got increased to G20. So in this context, I'll give you a concept builder. What is G7? So it is basically an intergovernmental political forum consisting of which countries? Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, United Kingdom, and the United States. And recently, European Union is also a non-enumerated member. So this is the G7 countries. So the countries which makes important decisions: Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, UK. So you can expect such question in the prelims, where they can ask you which of the following are not countries included in the G7 countries. So very important, have a strong idea about the G7 countries. And moving on, next is regarding the G20 countries. And the group of G20 comprises of 19 you can also add the other countries. You can say one is Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Korea, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Turkey, UK, US, and the European Union. So you can see all these countries. So this is also important for the prelims examination, because you need to have an idea for the prelims examination, in the sense which of the following are members of G20 countries. This can be an expected questions also. And G20 members represents around 85% of the world GDP, and over 75% of the world trade, and two-thirds of the world population. So this statistics can also be a question. The G20, this can also be a statement: the G20 members represent around 85% of the global GDP, 75% of the trade, and two-thirds of the population. So know about all this, and concept builders. And it also talked about something called as SDG. This article talks about Sustainable Development Goals and 17 UN SDG. So in this context, you should know what is the SDG. And it says time is running out, climate change is happening, and the planet is heating up very fastly. So you should know what are SDG. This can also be a prelims question. Which of the following are SDG? So you should be having clear cut idea about the SDG. And regarding this, actually, SDG and the world outlook, this says that SDG describes actually 17 complex combination of what? Environmental, social, and economic problems. So also understand that the one important point, that this 17 problems, the SDG issues, do not apply to all the countries. Say, imagine there is a country called A. You do not believe that 17 issues are actually plaguing A. There is another country called B. You do not believe that all the 17 problems are a big time problem in B. So these are small, small things that you need to understand. And for example, problems of the oceans are immediately threatening to island countries, but not landlocked countries yet. So this is a very important thing that you can note. The problems of the oceans are the problems for the island countries and not for the landlocked countries. Environment problems are not same in Canada and Barbados. Very important. And opportunities for work, decent work. This is SDG 8. The opportunities of decent work are inadequate everywhere. But certain SDGs apply almost all to all countries. No country has only one of the SDG problem. Every country has at least six or seven problems. So average, you can say that not all 17 SDGs have problems in every countries, but average you can say six to seven sustainable development goals issues affect almost every country. And you can say that one global solution for the environment, society, or economy cannot apply everywhere. So this is also very important. So one global solution, or one problem or global solution for all the environmental, society, and economy problem is not the solution. It cannot apply everywhere. It can work in China, it may not work in Tanzania. So this is the important point that we have to know about the global governance. And also there is another important governance report, which is McKinsey Global Institute says pixels of progress. It actually divided the world into 40,000 micro regions. Very good. 40,000 world was divided into 40,000 micro regions, and to examine on the ground which statistical average at country level GDP cannot reveal. So basically, they wanted to identify. We actually measure a country's progress and everything regarding with the GDP, or maybe economic indicators. So this study actually, when you divided 40,000 regions, they had very clear cut idea that GDP or economy is not the or criteria to measure the complete growth. So after this study, it actually came to a conclusion that the growth of GDP at a country level explains only 20% of the progress. Very, very important. When you analyze the country, it actually gave an idea that GDP is only able to measure 20% of the progress, but remaining 80%, the remaining 80% is completely local issues and local problems and need more attention. So you can just see that out of 100, we often feel that the country is developed on the basis of GDP. So this is the basic GDP or the economic indicator. And on the other side, you have the other issues, the others. And after the study said that only 20% of the issues are actually understood or revealed by GDP, but the other person 80% are still other aspects relating to local and specific. So GDP and or the GNP or the economic indicators may not be the right tool to measure progress. That is very important. So it is not the only tool to measure progress. So and India has also proposed an approach of life. This is also very important. Know about this concept of lifestyle for sustainable development to the G20. So remember this concept of life. This is lifestyles for sustainable development. Very, very important. You should be knowing what you mean by life. So, on the occasion of UN Climate Change Conference, Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi has introduced the lifestyle for environment to engage individuals in mitigating the adverse effects of climate change. So, this is something to do with the climate change. And how are we going to do it? The use of social networks to bring up change in the climate landscapes. It has got three pillars. Please remember, it can be a prelims question also. One is knowing individual behavior, second is co-create globally, and the third is leveraging local culture. So know about this concept of life and in detail. What do you mean by individual behaviors, co-create globally, leverage local cultures, and how are you going to use the social network to create a better change in climate change? So life is also very important. Please do remember this concept. And moving on to the question, I have one, two, three, four, five important question. Mere economic growth will not solve the world's problems. It needs to be sustainable and equitable actions. Examine. Mere economic growth will not solve world problem. It needs to be sustainable and need equitable actions. Examine the statement. Second is Vasudeva Kudumbagam, one earth, one family, one future. Essay question. And what are sustainable lifestyles? You should know what this concept of what do you mean by sustainable lifestyle. And next is what is the lifestyle for environment initiative? How is it helping to tackle the challenges of environmental degradation and climate change? So how is life changing the climate change and environmental degradation? Very important. And the other one is in the modern times, how can a country like India in actuality move towards achieving Purna Swaraj, full political, social, economic for all citizens? So very important essay question. In a country like India, how can India in actuality move towards Purna Swaraj, full political, social, economic freedom for all citizens? So read about all the questions, these questions, try to answer. If you want some questions, it will be really good. And the master checklist, know what is life, know about the G7 G20 for 2024. Please prepare it yourself. And what is Purna Swaraj in history? The article talks about Purna Swaraj. So in modern India, you should be having an idea about what is this concept of Purna Swaraj and what is India's role and achievements in G20. That is also very important because G20 now is being led by India. So it's better that we know what is India's role and achievements in G20. So that was regarding another important session that we need to understand. Moving on to the next important one was regarding the state visit to a more robust relationship. This is actually nothing but GS paper 2. This is actually GS paper 2 international relations and nothing but it talks about India US relationship. It talks about Indo US relationship. So you need to understand what are the important aspects that is actually being covered in the Indo US deals. And what about the trade? It talks about trade. So you should know what is the trade status of India US. These statistics will help you to crack a lot of questions in the prelims and have a better idea for you to have to write your mains answers also. So please to remember that. So let's apply the IAS filter. The India US trade relationship also is another important aspect because recently Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington was seen as very historic. Why very historic? Because it was the first of an Indian head of a state in 14 years. Very important. First in 14 years, and only the third for an Indian leader in 75 years since Indian independence to visit the state visit to Washington. So it was actually a good thing to for Indo-US relationship, and they discussed progress in many areas, and one of that is economic, no doubt, because the trade relationship between two countries is growing, surpassing almost, see the value actually. It has mainly economic, big relationship between India and US. So economic is actually one thing. You can see that the US dollars 120 billion. So that is the trade relationship that we are talking at, close to around 120 billion. So even the article and the relation says that Indo-US relationship, the potential is even more. Even there is more potential beyond 100 and 120 billion dollars. So India should use that opportunity is one suggestion. So it's more than that relation. And India has actually inked few FTA. What do you mean by the concept of FTA? It is the concept of free trade agreement. So why is India actually giving mooting concept of free trade agreements? So why are free trade agreements very important? You need to have an idea. So already India has inked a lot of free trade agreements with UAE, Australia, and has launched negotiations for parallel deals with the European Union, UK, and Canada. So India is actually trying to do a lot of trade. India is actually trying to do what? India is trying to increase the trade with lot of countries and bring more trade. And even it has planned what FTAs with so many countries. So you should know what you mean by free trade agreement. So very importantly, know this aspect. And in this concept, you should know that when India is actually trying to go for the free trade agreement, you should know that United States of America, the US has actually moved away from FTA. It's actually gone to higher levels of trading system. So United States of America now believe in what? Resilient supply chains, reshoring or friendshoring. We have already discussed this concept in editorial one, where how one country is actually dependent on other country, which is a friendly country which shares the same value. It takes products, raw materials, everything. Friendshoring, and even prioritizing labor rights and climate friendly production. So US has gone beyond FTA, foreign trade agreement. It creates supply chain, friendshoring, prioritizing labor issues, and more climate friendly production. So it's much more, US has gone much more higher. And recent visit to America, India has actually solved around 6 disputes with the World Trade Organization. So that is also an important thing. India has actually solved almost 6 problems of WTO. And one thing that the article discusses is regarding the USMCA. What is the concept of USMCA? It is nothing but United States Mexico Canada Agreement. So you can expect such questions for the prelims also. So it was actually entered in 2020. So know about this, which it substituted NAFTA. Very important. The USMCA actually substituted NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. So uh, now the US MCA is actually beneficial for North American workers, farmers, ranchers, and business people. It aims to create more balanced trade, supporting high paying jobs for Americans and growing the North American economy. So it has actually replaced NAFTA. It has replaced NAFTA. And now you should know what you mean by USMCA and United States Mexico Canada Agreement. So this has also been discussed in this article. And it also talks about, not only it talks about India US relationship, it also talks about India Australia relationship. India Australia relationship is also mentioned. And in this concept, you should know that India and Australia agreement have agreed to do on what? It has agreed to work on the economic cooperation and trade agreement. Very important. Australia and India have signed this concept of economic cooperation and trade agreement. And what are the benefits? Australia is benefiting from India from what? Australia is getting a lot of wines in the Indian market, wool, sheep meat, among other goods, while India won nearly duty free access to Australian market. So, after India and Australia relationship, please remember they have signed the economic cooperation. They have signed the economic cooperation and trade agreement. So, both of them are actually benefiting. So, the target of bilateral trade by 2030 is going to be 500 to 600 billion dollars. So just imagine 500 to 600 billion dollars is the trade that is expected to happen between India and Australia. So also know about all these concepts in detail. And next is get some questions. India for the United States of America is a durable long-term partner in a variety of realm. Discuss. So this is also very important. India for United States is a long-term durable partner. Do you agree with this statement? So you should discuss this statement. What are the benefits drawn as a result of India and Australia's economic cooperation and trade agreement? Analyze. We just now discussed how is India and Australia getting benefited, what is the trade target, etc. So know what is FTI, know what is economic cooperation and trade agreement master checklist, what is WTO, and what is USMCA, US Mexico Canada agreement. You need to have a clear cut idea regarding all this. So this was regarding the international relations article, and let's check the other important articles. Next is deep tech startups taking brave risk. This is a clear cut question from GS paper 3 economy, especially the startups, and how does the startups contribute to the economy. So you know that India is now one of the biggest hub for startup growth, and India is one of the biggest hub for startup growth. And in this context, you should also know what you mean by deep tech startup. Deep tech startup. You must have all heard about the fintechs, which is financial technology startups like edtechs, the fintech, edtech, uh, the health tech, health related aspects. So, what do you mean by the concept of deep tech? And in this context, very simply, how do you think the deep tech startups are contributing to the growth of economy in India? Very important. This can be a good question for the mains also. So let's quickly discuss the apply the IAS filter, and let's check out the answer also. So today you can see that more than 1 lakh startups are recognized by government, and it's a good thing. And most of them are coming from tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So it's nice to see that a lot of people are chasing their own dreams to become an entrepreneur and change the world. It's a good thing. But what is deep tech anyway? Deep tech refers to the class of startup business that develop new offerings, very important, new offerings based on tangible engineering innovation. Very good. One is tangible engineering innovation, and second is scientific discoveries. So deep tech startup involves what? Tangible engineering, the tangible engineering, and second is it concepts of scientific discoveries. So the offerings related to tangible engineering and scientific discoveries are all startups that is called the deep tech startups. And let's take an example. Which are this? Artificial intelligence, advanced material, blockchain, biotechnology, robotics, drones, photonics, quantum computing are more. So these are some of the most important example of deep tech startup where the offering or product is actually created with engineering, innovation, or scientific discoveries and advances. So please have an idea about what you mean by the deep tech startup is also very important. You need to have an idea on that. And one thing that the article talks is about deep tech startup is one way India is taking technology risk. Very, very important. India is taking technology risk through this route. And you can see that traditional risk taking sectors such as government department, legacy corporates seem to be frozen. And most of this. So let's take this idea first. You need, as a country, definitely as a country, every country needs to create path breaking breakthroughs in science and tech, and other aspects, because many countries are actually making advances. So what about India? The article says that the government sector, because as a startup company, a company should be ready to experiment. And the traditional government industries are not taking the technological risk to create that experiment. That is the point. The traditional industries or government owned things are not taking the efforts for having a scientific experimentation. And it is in this context that the deep tech startups the deep tech startups are taking that risk. The deep tech startups are taking that risk is the most important thing that you should know. And it is a good thing, even though according to the article it says that the government agencies are not taking that risk, but startups, especially deep tech, are taking that risk. And that is very, very important, because this can create a big revolution in the science and technology growth in India. So that is the biggest role that deep tech startups are actually functioning. And you should know that a lot of industries, people are investing in deep tech startups and buying successful companies. Like Tata's have bought the Sankhya and Tejas networks, Reliance has acquired the Faradian, and Hero Motors has actually acquired equity in the Ather Motors. So everything, so that is the success of deep tech, and why science and technology and research is very important. You should know this context. And how do you think government should support the deep tech startup? The one is availability of much larger risk capital for deep tech startup. So capital, government should create more capital, larger risk capital, because with the biggest problem of deep tech startup is, you know why the biggest problem of deep tech startup is, majority of them don't get the proper funding or the financing. They do not get the financing or the funding. So that is relating to very important to be known. And the government should lay more emphasis on the aforementioned sectors in the existing SIDB funds of fund. So SIDB is one thing, such thing where government releases a lot of fund, the SIDB. So you should earmark more funding from the SIDB, and industry must increase their research funds. You should increase their research, channel their funds, research funds. So more research funds, more capital, SIDB needs to be grown. And we need to enable mass procurement of indigenous developed technology. So this is something called, very similar to Make in India. So we should actually have an idea where we should actually buy or procure technologies that are domestically produced, which are indigenously produced in India. Tech produced within India, tech that are produced within India. So this is also very important for majority of the things. So these are the important aspects regarding the deep tech startups. And let's give three important questions. uh, so I think this area is actually not taken, this was the previous area. So how are deep tech entrepreneur startup ecosystem creating new avenues for science and technology discoveries? Good question. How are the deep tech creating more startup ecosystems in promoting science and technology? Deep tech startups are the main route through which India is taking technology risk to build scientific capability. Do you agree? Give your views. How can Startup India 2.0 support Indian economic growth, job creation, national security, and other national capabilities? Discuss this statement. So these are some of the important question corners that you get, and you also get another master checklist here. What are deep tech startups? What are the government role in promoting startups in India? What are challenges faced by deep tech startup? What do you mean by incubation for startup? What is the word incubation? And what is the Atal New India Challenge? Please do understand and know about this concept. What is Atal New India Challenge? So I think we discussed a lot of concepts for the deep tech startups also. And moving on to the next and last editorial is the contours of India's formal job crisis. So this is a clear-cut article in GS paper 3 economy, especially the economy and the job employment and unemployment is something that the article discusses about. So let's quickly apply the IAS filter and take the most important relevant points from this. One is Employees Provident Fund or EPF. This article completely revolves around one important concept of what is EPF or Employment Provident Fund, or what is EPF. So one thing, how is government measuring the employment? You say that this many people are employed in India. So there are various ways for the governments to employ this. How many people are basically employed? So one such method, according to the government, since 2017 is regarding to use the EPF or the Employees Provident Fund scheme as a measure of payroll employment and formal job creation in the country. So how many people are employed in this country? There are various measures, and since 2007 the government has been using EPF as one such measure to measure the employment rate in India. Whether it is right or wrong, we'll discuss in this article. So the monthly data released as a part of this initiative has generally shown net increase in the number of contributors, and this has portrayed employment creation. So when you for every month's data, when you compare the 1 month data, you see that the what is EPF actually? It's a contribution. So we'll understand. So the contributions to EPF has increased. When the contribution has increased, they have actually analyzed that when the contribution has increased, definitely employment also will have must have increased. So employment also must have increased. When the contribution has increased, employment must have also increased. Is it right or wrong? This may not be the right situation. So before understanding this, you should know what is EPF. What is EPF? So Employment Providence Fund is, or EPF, is a popular saving scheme that the EPFO has introduced under the supervision of Government of India. So EPF is actually a provident fund scheme introduced in 1952. Is a retirement benefit scheme where both the employer and the employee contribute. So the employee plus the employer, you contribute, your employer contributes, and it's actually a retirement benefit scheme. And at the end of the retirement, you get the provident fund, including the interest that has been taken. So it is actually a contribution that is being made. So that is the reason why in every month the contribution is supposed to, one of the reports says that the contribution is increased. So when the contribution is increased, you are analyzing that the employment must have also increased. So is it right or wrong? It may not be right. So EPF measuring employment, so measuring employment rate with EPF may not be the right solution, is what the article is trying to tell us. Okay, so this point is clear. What is EPF? And what is EPFO? The Employment Provident Fund Organization. The EPFO is actually a non-constitutional body. It's not a constitutional body that promotes employees to save funds for retirement. So it's a good thing that EPFO is a good thing. It's saving. It's a non-constitutional body, and it was launched in 1951 and is governed by the Ministry of Labor and Employment. Very good. It offers schemes that covers Indian and international workers. So both Indian and international workers, Minister of Labor and Employment is coming under that. This can be a good prelims question also. They can ask you about EPFO in the prelims also. And unlike the EPF monthly enrollment data, which generally depicts increase in contributor, the EPF annual reports reveal that the number of contributors to the scheme is relatively stagnant. So another report which says that EPFO's annual reports say that the number of people have actually decreased. So contradiction. It says that the number of contributions have decreased. So that is the reason why it may not be the right measure to measure employment. That's something that you get. And regarding some of the statistics that you see, that from 2012 and 22, the number of regular contributor to the EPF increased from 30 million to 46. So the people who contribute to the EPF has increased from for 30 million to 46 million. As India overtakes China, a lot of population. So what you need? You need to have a strong, educated and growing working age population with employment. So this is, the article talks completely about employment. Whether India has overtaken China doesn't mean that we have a lot of people, but the key question for an economy is whether India has overtaken China, a new population, whether this population, the quality population, is able to get the quality employment, is the most important thing that we have to understand here. And what about the stagnation in the employment? So according to the economy, stagnation has caused due to pandemic. The COVID-19 has caused a lot of pandemic in the employment. And the employment information. So one thing, we are talking about employment, the quality employment and the measurement of employment. And one is the EPF, which according to a lot of people, it is not the right measure. It should not be the right measure. There is another important thing called as DGET. What is DGET? It is the Directorate General of Employment Training, published since 2013. It has not been published. It has not been published. And the DGT data were historically the original source of formal sector payroll employment data since 1950. So much before the DGT was used, and Reserve Bank of India utilizes as the main source of formal sector employment data. So DGET was also used to measure the formal employment ratio and calculation, but from 2013 it is not used, and now from 2017 the EPF is being used. It may not be the right measure. That is the important point that we have to get here. And in the India China issue, is India's population getting the best quality employment, is the next important problem that we have to discuss here. And let's check the So a single data source is inefficient to understand formal employment and jobs in the country. Understanding and addressing issues of job creation or job quality cannot be achieved without a wide range of standardized, stable, and publicly available labor standards. This is a very good question. Understanding the issue of job creation and quality will not be able to achieved just with one parameter. You need more wide range of standardized, stable, publicly available labor statistics. Very important. So I think you got this idea. Let's check the questions also. A good labor statistics is vital for understanding and solving the issues of job creation in an economy. Examine. This is the same question that we've discussed. A good statistics is important. Why? India overtaking China in population without a quality growth in employment generation is an economic trap. Please analyze the statement. This is a good question. India overtaking China without creating quality employment is going to be an economic trap for India. Do you agree? Analyze the statement. So, master checklist for 2024, know what is EPFO and what is Director General of Employment and Training, DGET. Something that you can definitely remember for this. So, please do remember all these concepts. We have discussed around close to 10 15 questions for mains and other important master checklist also. So, thank do check out the Kickstart in the app to start your IAS preparation at just 599, and also check out the important courses, the online and LearnStroke's important courses, the integrated prelims and mains test series, and super mentoring. All of the people who want mentoring, we are always ready at your service. So do subscribe to the channel and please press the bell icon to receive the classes, and check out the Telegram channel and check out the current affairs pre-current affairs page in the LearnStroke. And if you want to chat with me, please do send me messages in arjun@learnstrokeapp.com. For any inquiry, you can just flash and contact in the number that is being given. So please do subscribe and please do learn more about this. So see you in the next class. Thank you so much.